In this video, I'm going to be ranking these 6 TCGs that were all new to me at Gen Con 2023. What's up, everyone? It's Dan with Main Deck, and I just got back pretty recently from Gen Con 2023. I had to take a little bit of a break, and if you can hear, my voice is still not fully recovered from the dreaded con crud. It hit me pretty hard, but I am back. I'm making some more videos, and I've had this one on my mind since I was at Gen Con. I was excited to make this. At Gen Con, I played tons of TCGs, lots of TCGs, ones I already play, and a bunch of ones that were completely new to me. So I actually had 6 entirely new TCGs that I got a chance to play. Some of them were, just releasing. Some of them haven't released yet, and some of them released either fairly recently or a little bit in the past. I'm going to tell you which ones I like the most and why. So here is my ranking of these 6 TCGs, which were all new to me at Gen Con 2023. All right, number 6, and a bit of a hot take, I think a controversial pick for some, but hear me out. I'm sure you are going to be interested in hearing my explanation for this. My number 6 is Disney Lorcana at the bottom of the list. So Lorcana is a game that is definitely going to be for a lot of people and is not really for me, I think, after playing. So I played a number of starter games with the starter decks, and I've also then, after I got back home from Gen Con, I downloaded Pixelborn and I played some games with some pretty high quality, pretty well vouched for constructed decks as well, because I really wanted to make sure I gave Lorcana a pretty fair shake. I feel like Lorcana is a game that is going to really, really appeal to you if you are just a big Disney fan, and I think it's going to be an excellent game for younger or for newer TCG players to try out and get into who don't want all of the complexities that come with a lot of the gamer style games. I think Lorcana has some game to it. I don't think, by the way, I'm not saying it's not like checkers to chess kind of thing, but I find that Lorcana just doesn't engage me as much as I want it to. I find that a lot of the gameplay in Lorcana really I could just get the feeling of that from playing Magic the Gathering, a game that I've played for many, many years. I don't play it as much competitively now, but still, if I wanted to, I just feel like I would just jump to Magic instead, because the Lorcana theme doesn't really get me personally very excited. And the gameplay is just missing, I think, some of the complexity and some of the interesting play that I would be looking for from a game of this style. And I think the pacing in Lorcana is kind of strange. I feel like the game goes on longer than it needs to, which is a weird thing for me to say. I'm not someone who wants like these like turn 2 kind of Japanese card game formats that some of those card games tend to trend towards. But also, the games just seem to go super late. The way that lore scales on your glimmers seems a little out of whack. It seems like it's tough to start to generate it fairly quickly. And a lot of these games, if you don't hit your card draw, if you're not playing card draw, which would be a big issue, any sort of way of getting card advantage is critical in Lorcana, because the game goes so long that you just simply run out of cards in hand. As a draw one game where you're playing any card from your hand as a resource every turn, it's very easy to run out of things to do. It's almost guaranteed that you get to have a lore to play, not a lore to play, you get to have a resource to play every single turn. An ink, that's what it's called. You get to have an ink to play every single turn, unless you built your deck with like way too many non-inkable cards. And because you're just dumping 2 cards a turn, and the cards you're dumping aren't necessarily generating a lot of lore, or they're just getting attacked by your opponent's things and dying, you just, without a bunch of consistent card draw, you run out of resources pretty quickly. So you see a lot of the competitive decks really, are hinging on things that draw cards, because you really, 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 really need that in Lorcana. That's not necessarily a problem, because I think there are a lot of card games where that is an important thing to do, but it just means that the way the game flowed, I just wasn't really vibing it as we were playing. I didn't like the pacing too much. The theme wasn't doing much for me, and I wasn't finding myself engaged in many of the decisions. So, and frankly, it's very rough in the starter deck format. If I was teaching someone this game, I would very, very quickly move them out of the starter decks and to more constructed decks, because the game isn't so complicated that you can't handle, I think, constructed decks, even if you're relatively new to TCGs. And I just frankly find Lorcana a little boring to play. So it's not something you're probably going to see much on the channel here, because I don't have a lot of passion for this. It was my number 6 game of the weekend, with some of these other games definitely being more enticing to me than Lorcana was. If you love Lorcana, that's awesome. I'm not looking to get all of the Disney hatred, but this is just my personal take on Lorcana. There are a lot of games I would just rather be playing. So that is my number 6. Lorcana. My number 5 game. Now, this is probably the game I think that's been out the longest of all of the games on this list. This is a very interesting game that you may have heard of, a Canadian game called Legion Realms of War. And it is a, boy, how do you explain this game? I think the easiest way is this is Canadian Yu-Gi-Oh! I got to sit down where Lorcana I got starter decks and got to play. With Legions, I only got to sit down at a demo table and play a demo game with someone. They had a couple of like full decks we were playing with, so I did play a full game, and I played as the Orc faction and they played as the Titans. I got to experience the people who made Legions are clearly Yu-Gi-Oh fans, because I got to experience the full Yu-Gi-Oh style gameplay. Now, I want to be really clear about what I mean about that. First of all, there are very clear superficial similarities. This game has trap cards that you play face down and you can spring on your opponent's turn. This has 5 zones that you're going to be playing monsters to, and you can play 1 per turn, and then you can attack your opponent with them. Or attack your opponent's things with them and then attack the opponent. It's got a lot of similarities just superficially, but really it comes down to how the archetypes and how the card effects play out are, just strikingly similar. As someone who played Yu-Gi-Oh! Not only at the very beginning, but at a few points in the Synchro area, the Xyz era, as well as some Master Duel when that came out recently, getting some of the Pendulum and the Link stuff. I do have enough passing familiarity with Yu-Gi-Oh! To know a Canadian Yu-Gi-Oh! When I see one. When it comes down to it, when I'm reading a Legion's Realms at War effect, it reads just like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Effect would. There are going to be things that are searching out certain cards from your deck, putting them into your hand or putting them into your graveyard, and then banish the cards from your graveyard to do these effects. You're using this one card to search out these specific other cards, and then you're using those effects when they get searched out that way to do more things. It feels just like one of these crazy bombastic Yu-Gi-Oh! Effects, and that is not a bad thing. There are a lot of people who really, really like the style of gameplay that Yu-Gi-Oh! Brings to the table, and if you've ever enjoyed that style of gameplay, but maybe you either didn't like the aesthetic of Yu-Gi-Oh!, you didn't like just the specific gameplay patterns, the way Yu-Gi-Oh! Was using the extra deck, or if you ever thought that, hey, you know what? I wish Yu-Gi-Oh! Had some things that started in play and that tick down and that do more stuff and make the game just a little more complex, then I really do have a game for you. You should check out Legion's Realms at War. For me, this is probably a pass for me. It is just, that style of gameplay is too involved, too focused, and sometimes a little, the thought processes are a little too focused on just kind of tunnel visioning down one particular course of action. It reminds me in some way, this is going to sound maybe weird to some people, it reminds me in some way of certain like chess openings where it's like, okay, if your opponent does this, then you need to start with this opening, you need to counter with this. Yu-Gi-Oh! Plays in a really weird way, similar to that, where you need to know your certain lines that you're going for, and you need to be sort of executing these particular lines every time you play. I'm not someone who really enjoys that style of gameplay as much. I like things to be a little more tactical, shifting a little bit more based on what I draw and everything. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Just being so search heavy and so not quite deterministic, but being able to find those very specific lines and execute them game after game gives that style of play that it makes it that style of play what it is. And that isn't exactly my favorite way to play games. And Legions definitely looks like it is leaning towards that style of gameplay. Now, I'm certain there are other styles of gameplay as well. This often comes up when I say I'm not a fan of a game. They say, well, you need to play this deck and it works better that way. Well, I'm sure, but I like a game where I like everything in the package, and not just playing one particular style of deck against all the other ones. So for me, I'm not sure I'm a huge fan of that, but it is something that I'm certain that people could get really into. Legions is more of an independent game. It is a smaller game, and you can actually tell based on the production of the cards. I felt like the production of the cards and the plating and the foiling, everything wasn't quite up to the par that other games are presenting right now. But as they grow, that is something that can certainly be improved upon. And the game has very, very passionate creators who I was getting to chat to there directly, who are really, they love their game, and I definitely have seen people who have fallen in love with it too. So if it sounds like something you might like, you should maybe check out Legions Realms at War. For me, it's just going to be my number 5 game that I learned at Gen Con. All right, my number 4 game is Kryptik TCG. Now, this is a game where I got a lot of people on my all new games releasing in 2023 video. A lot of people commented and said, "Where's Kryptik? Where's Kryptik?" Kryptik actually, technically, I was gonna put it in the video, but I had to look into it. It technically released in late 2022. There was sort of kind of in between 2022 and 2023, but by technicality, it just simply didn't make it onto the video. I was aware of Kryptik. I had looked at Kryptik before. I just had never gotten a chance to play it, but eBay was giving out tons and tons of like starter decks and stuff. So we got to pick up a couple starter decks, and I got to sit down with the guys and play starter deck Kryptik. And these starter decks were cool. They actually came with booster packs as well. We got to crack those open and take a look at things. And my overall opinion of Kryptik is it's fine. Kryptik is basically Duel Masters. If you have ever played Duel Masters or Kaijudo, Kryptik is the closest thing I've seen to a Duel Masters or Kaijudo since Kaijudo. It has a couple of differences. Those differences are both meaningful and not, in a way, and I'll explain that. The main differences between Kryptik and Kaijudo, outside of the theme, which we'll talk about at the end of this, are that you can play things at instant speed in Kryptik. Your units have the magic style stats instead. So basically, when they made Duel Masters, they pared back magic and simplified it a little bit. And Kryptik kind of adds some of those components back into it. And with the way the shield system works, anything can be a shield trigger, and often they'll have just like a lower cost or something to play it instead. Which means, I guess there's more of a gamble. It's kind of a weird situation in Duel Masters. When you broke a shield, if it had a shield trigger, you just got to play it for free. In Kryptik, you actually kind of have to like decide, am I going to just hold resources back and gamble on playing what breaks from a shield? That's a decision that I don't think I actually was enjoying making. Because if you gamble wrong and you either can't play, you don't have enough resources to play the thing that was a shield, or it's just not something you really care about, you are just kind of losing out on your potential turn. And it just didn't feel like a very good gamble to make. But overall, my biggest takeaway from Kryptik's gameplay, I guess, was that it felt like a weird compromise. It felt like if we're going to make Duel Masters, let's just get the advantages of that sort of streamlined, easy to learn system, approachable, inviting, welcoming system. And Kryptik, with its very dark theme, and then just like adding extra complexity, but ultimately still just being the Duel Master system, felt like it was just in this weird middle ground. And I'm going to be extremely thematic here and say it felt like it was in a weird limbo or purgatory, where it wasn't quite achieving to me what I thought it should be, by either like leaning hard into being that kind of fun, approachable Kaijudo setting, Duel Master setting, or being that more complex, like full package that a Magic the Gathering initially was. I'm never going to turn down a Duel Masters game. It's a great system. The shield system is really fun. It's easy and quick to play. You can put down anything as a resource, which removes some of the feel bad that some people have about the land system in Magic. But I don't know if Kryptik was it. And I think one of the biggest issues I had really was the theme. And I don't want to offend people when I say this, so I apologize if you're a big fan of Kryptik's theme, but I felt that the theme on Kryptik was just, it felt kind of the most pasted on of any TCG I felt and I've played. And I feel like this is something that I've seen in other like board games as well, where it's just got this very generic kind of nebulous theme about things, souls being in limbo and then manifesting out. So in Kryptik, a lot of the characters, or their citizens, they're called, just have kind of like a single first name. So you have things like Muriel, and I think we had one that was like Davy, and you have Cormac, and you know, they're all just kind of one name characters with like human type. And ultimately it didn't engage me at all. It was just, here's your limbo, here are your guys, here are your souls, your 11-year something. And I don't know, it felt so nebulous, so wishy-washy, so not, it did not feel like there was anyone on the team who was sitting down and developing like a strong lore, a strong story. It kind of just felt like they did the bare minimum to kind of get a theme onto this game. And that might not be the case. And I don't want to downplay if a bunch of work did go into figuring out the lore for this, but it doesn't quite come off that way from the starter deck experience. I didn't get the feel that this was a thriving world. It felt dark. It felt old in not necessarily a bad way, but you know, with all this classical style artwork and everything, it felt just like it was there. And that didn't engage me. It didn't get me excited. So Kryptik was a game where, I mean, I think Kryptik is ultimately for me, a very middle of the road game. It's a solid gameplay system. It's not like a bad gameplay system, but it's in a sea of other games that are quite good. And it's an art style that was passable, fine, good. Like classical art's not bad. It's good, but it didn't excite me. It was there. With a theme that also just felt like it was kind of there and not really getting me excited about the game. I'm sure there are a lot of people who enjoy Kryptik, and that's awesome. For me, it was just middle of the road. It's my number 4 game that I learned there. Not something I'm going to seek out to play more, but it's something that exists. That's Kryptik, number 4. My number 3 game. Now this is a game that released earlier this year, and I simply I'd been very busy leading up to Gen Con, so I just simply didn't have a chance to sit down and learn this. So I was excited. I bought a starter myself to learn at the con, as well as Jason on the main deck team also grabbed a starter, even though he had some at home, just so he could sit down and play with me, which was really cool. Shout out to Jason for doing that. And we got to play Shadowverse Evolve. Shadowverse Evolve was actually... surprisingly, I really enjoyed this game quite a bit. I wasn't sure how I'd take to it. I mean, I thought it's probably all right. I thought Shadowverse Evolve was really cool. The NFC cards with the little companion app where you can press emotes to, it's like a soundboard out of the 2000s. It was really funny, actually. We were making some really interesting noises with that soundboard device that you should definitely check out if you check out Shadowverse. But it was I like the integration of the app, and it was fun to play that way. The system was solid. It was an enjoyable game to play. And, I was happy to keep playing several games and show people the game there. It's a solid game. Shadowverse has a few issues for me. Number 1, it is a game where it has Japanese releases ahead of English ones. And I'm not a big fan of that. I don't like that system. I like the excitement of a new set and exploring it. And I don't like when, it has already been in a metagame for months before I even get my hands on it. You might notice that's why that's the reason I don't cover any games like that. Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, just ones that aren't as exciting to me, because I like even if it's sort of a facade and I'm not actually going to discover the hottest new deck, I like the idea that I can discover new decks, and the excitement of exploring new decks. A big part of the TCG hobby to me is sitting there and thinking about, man, what kind of cool deck can I build? I wonder if this deck would be good. And sometimes, in these games, that's just already, that's not really part of the game, because it's more or less been figured out. Now, I'm sure there are ways to, of course, come up with your own spins on things and how metagames develop differently in different regions of the world. Completely understand that, but it just takes a little bit of wind out of my sails for a game when a game's like that. I also feel like Bushy Road needs to really work on their organized play system a little bit to get me a little more excited. They historically haven't had a wonderful organized play system, so I would need to see a little bit more of that to get a little more excited about the game. And the game is also quite archetypal. It's a game where you're going to sort of pick an archetype and play that archetype. There aren't really, the leaders don't do anything in this game. They're just kind of there. And so you build the deck around them, but it's lacking. It's like, it starts you with the leader, but the only point of the leader is to unlock like cool sounds in the soundboard, which is kind of cool, but really not that exciting for me from a gameplay perspective. So there were a few things I wasn't like a massive fan of Shadowverse, but the actual gameplay itself was solid and fun, if like clear that it was a digital game that they made into paper, especially based on how the app managed your resources and everything. I think Shadowverse is fun. I certainly, I could, if you are loving Shadowverse, I totally get it. I totally understand that. I get why you're having fun with it, but those are just the small things that'll keep me from necessarily getting into it. But that said, I would play Shadowverse above the other 3 ones that I've listed so far. So Shadowverse is my number 3 pick from games I learned from Gen Con 2023. Okay. With the number 2 pick, we are now getting to games that I actively really did enjoy and will be looking to play more going into the future. My number 2 pick is actually the game that I thought was going to be my number 1 pick going into Gen Con, and that is Star Wars Unlimited. Star Wars Unlimited from Fantasy Flight Games is a phenomenal game. It certainly delivered on what I was hoping it would be. We already did the ultimate how to play because I was already pretty excited about it. And I was very pleased that once I played the game, I could not wait to play it more. And in fact, had to go back and run their demo more times with them just to get in some more experience. And since then, I have jumped on Felttable, the online resource where you can play against AI with Star Wars Unlimited. And I have been jamming games on that too and just having a blast. Star Wars Unlimited is, if you haven't caught it, the interesting thing about this game, of course, it's Star Wars themed, obviously, but it uses a very different gameplay mechanism than any of the other games we've listed so far, where instead of taking full turns, you are going to be taking back and forth actions with each other until you both pass. And what that does for the game is it makes it extremely dynamic while still being extremely approachable. I think this system needs to be used by more and more games. And actually, my number 1 game on the list also uses that back and forth action system, which goes to show just how much I like that system and just how good I think it is. Now, Star Wars Unlimited does a few more things that I also really enjoy. It does allow you to place any card from your hand as a resource, but you start the game by placing 2 of them down. I love this kind of idea of starting the game a little bit farther into the game rather than that slow kind of first turn. We get to start with a couple of resources instead of 1 and start to play more things faster. It is a draw 2 game. At the end of each round, you get to draw 2 and then place 1 down as a resource, which helps the game, unlike, I think, contrasting with Lorcana earlier, it feels like the pacing on Star Wars Unlimited makes a lot more sense. It's a lot tougher to totally run out of cards. And if you do, that's usually quite late in the game to the point where the things you've played already should be able to start to really take you into the end game. It doesn't have the weird kind of pacing issue I feel with lore and questing in Lorcana, where the things do the damage that's listed on them and it's appropriate based on their drop. If you're playing a 9-drop thing, it's going to do 9 damage probably to the opponent. And your aggressively costed things are going to be doing a decent amount of damage as well, meaning that it is quite possible to sort of play an aggro rush strategy just like it is to play a control strategy. It all feels to me a little put together in a pace that I appreciate a little bit more. I love the artwork actually quite a bit. I started out being unsure of the artwork, but at Gen Con, I got to see the full decks put together. Everything felt so cohesive and so nice. I actually really enjoy this comic book art style on the cards now, and it makes me quite a bit more excited to get my hands on real cards when they release next year. So Star Wars Unlimited lived up to the hype for me. For the rest of the squad who went down there, we had several people who weren't even Star Wars fans, just jumped in the demo because like, sure, why not? I'll give it a try. Ended up really loving the game. I think Jason from the main deck team, I think it was like 11 demos he ended up doing, and he actually just thought it would be kind of a whatever game and ended up really, really loving it instead. So, yeah, Star Wars Unlimited, really, really enjoyed the game. Super excited for it. It will definitely be a core game that you see here on main deck starting next year when it releases. So keep an eye out for that. But it ended up not being my number one game. So let's go right into my number one game that I learned at Gen Con 2023 is Altered TCG. Now, the reason I am so excited for Altered is actually twofold. Number one, the game itself is solid. I really did enjoy the game, although info on the gameplay is quite scarce. We will have an Ultimate How to Play video for Altered TCG coming soon, but really, if you want to know all about why I'm excited about Altered, you really should click up here at the either right now or click it and watch it at the end of this video. I did an hour-long interview with Eric from Equinox about Altered, where he goes through and explains everything in detail about why Altered is going to be trying to change the TCG industry in 2023. The thing about Altered that puts it at number one is just how ambitious this project is. It is really crazy. I'm not someone who uses these terms lightly, by the way, but it is actually attempting to be revolutionary in the TCG space. And it's just very impressive. I will, just for the sake of this video, give you the very brief highlights, but please take some time to watch the video above if you haven't yet, because it's truly fascinating to hear all of the reasoning behind everything they're doing and hear the details on it. Very briefly, Altered is doing crazy things with digital ownership of the cards. It is not NFT based, but it is instead being hosted on the Equinox servers. You're going to be able to quickly scan all the cards you own to have them in your digital collection, and then you are able to print on demand any card that you digitally own, meaning that counterfeiting Altered cards won't be a thing that makes any sense to do. If your collection is stolen or damaged in a disaster, or you lose your deck, you just can print a new one. You don't have to worry about keeping close eye on your deck. Actually, just recently, I heard of someone losing their expensive Flesh and Blood deck at a Grand Archive tournament. That is not a thing that can happen in Altered. Furthermore, with this digital ownership, once you open your packs and scan all your cards in, if there's anything you want to sell, you just pop it up on a digital marketplace that is part of their app. It is possibly going to be the only digital marketplace for Altered, meaning that Equinox is going to be getting that percentage that the marketplace owner would normally get from making transactions on there, which means they have one of the best, most robust TCG business models of anyone out there. And it means you, as a buyer, a consumer of the game, can quickly and easily sell your cards to anyone. You don't have to ship anything, because you just sell the digital ownership of the card. And when the person who bought your card wants to get copies of it, they just do print on demand, shipped to them within days at a low cost. It's pretty crazy, all of the things that this is going to enable, not only for consumers, but for stores as well. Altered is looking to be an absolutely wild, novel concept, and I haven't even talked about the literal one-of-one unique cards in the game that there will be thousands and thousands of. If you get a unique card, it will have unique effects, and you are the only person who will own that card. Someone can find that you own it on the app, and if you are open to it, they can make you offers where you can digitally sell it to them. If they say, you know what, I want to pay you $1,000 for that, you go, it's not worth $1,000 to me. You just click, okay, I'll buy it, and the transaction is done. You don't have to worry about someone ripping you off online or anything. It's just done. Transaction's done. I think there are so many positives to this. There's going to be a lot of hurdles to overcome as well, but it is a super ambitious, super interesting project that I think is going to turn some heads when it releases on Kickstarter next year in February. The game has been in development for 3 years. All the artwork is done. The game already is in a great place. It's been play tested by Magic Pros. And the Kickstarter is really just there to generate hype and get some initial excitement going and get the game's information out to people. So if all that sounds cool to you, I should mention too, the gameplay itself is really good, if not very similar to Star Wars Unlimited, surprisingly. It also uses back and forth actions. It also uses 2 places where you place your units. But a really cool thing about Altered is that it actually is a non-combative game. Unlike a lot of TCGs out there, instead of having like power and toughness stats and attacking with things, All of your units play to either side of a board to help advance either your hero or your companion so that they can meet in the middle, which is the goal of the game. You are racing your opponent to meet your two champions together, and you are competing over different biomes, and your units just have stats that associate with those biomes. Every turn you're making decisions. Where's my opponent committing to? Which biomes are they trying to win in? Do I fight them on those biomes so they don't win, or do I press my own biome so that I can win? Very interesting decision making, an interesting system where your units get wiped at the end of turn and saved into memory, and then you can play them again later on a future turn, but you can only store so many at once. Just a lot of cool stuff going on, and all of the skeleton of it is that really solid play anything from your hand as a resource. At the end of turn, draw 2, put 1 down, and take turns playing actions. Honestly, the thing that really impressed me, and I'm going to go ahead and put a comment here that someone left on the altered video that we posted. This commenter here said, "This is what I thought Lorcana would be. I'm very interested." And this is actually the most succinct way to put it. The way Altered is being marketed as this very inclusive, very optimistic, very friendly art style, very friendly gameplay, but still competitive, using the back and forth action system as a way to make the game both very interesting and intricate to play, but also very approachable. Lorcana removed the ability to play things at instant speed, of course, to make the game more approachable to people, but the back and forth action system does that as well without removing that, and in fact, in my opinion, with adding additional levels of strategy and thinking that players can get into if they're so inclined. I think Altered is, for me, what I wish Lorcana was going to be as far as an interesting gameplay system with an approachable theme. But with everything that Equinox is doing, I'm super excited to see how it pans out for Altered in 2024. Altered is the most exciting game to me on the list, even if both it and Star Wars Unlimited are games that I am super excited for in 2024. I just can't wait to see how all of these crazy new digital ownership-based systems and unique card systems pan out for Altered. Like I said, if you need the full scoop on that, which you might, it's an hour-long video, but it is a great listen if you're just doing housework or commuting or something. I highly recommend you check that out and get the full scoop on Altered. And I think you will start to understand why it is my #1 game that I learned at Gen Con 2023. So there you guys go. That's my list of the top 6 games, the 6 games that I learned at Gen Con 2023 ranked. I'm sure you'll have your own opinions on what I've said and your own opinions on these games. So please go ahead, drop in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of these games. How did I rank them? Where was I right? Where was I wrong? I would love to just have a conversation with you. Let me know what you're thinking about these. And hey, if you're new to the channel and you enjoy all this TCG content, we've got this and so much more. So go ahead and leave a sub to the channel if you do enjoy this, and we would love to have you here at some future videos that we do. That's going to do it for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching another Main Deck video. You can support Main Deck by shopping at tcgplayer.com using our affiliate link. Check the description of the video for details. Main Deck is sponsored by JW Sports Cards and Gaming. Visit jwwcards.com and by our amazing patrons. Get exclusive content and other cool perks on the Main Deck Patreon. And hey, while you're here, I bet you'd like one of these videos. Go ahead, click one. I know you're gonna love it.